Good buzz.
Hi. Oh, what's the Saturday Night Live skit? Got a hot mic. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Thrive, our first ever Thrive in the Denver office. Go D-Town. Thank you for having us here and letting us kind of take over your beautiful, beautiful atrium, and for taking the time out to be here. And also, thank you for hanging with us at our false time on the lunch, since the caterer is now coming at 1 instead of noon. Or, yeah, at the end, instead of at 11. Sorry about that. We did our best. So, JK. Okay, so today's topic is about the impact and effects of entrepreneurship on socioeconomic mobility. So it's a big topic. We have some really interesting panelists. They'll introduce themselves in just a minute. And I think I know a lot of you, but for those of you I don't know, my name is Rachel Donaldson, and I run People, Culture, and Brand here at Zayo. And I'll give you just a couple little things to think about before these guys introduce themselves. And that is that Forbes ranked Denver the second best place in America to launch a startup, second best place in all of America. So go Colorado, go Denver. Also, the sixth highest rate of tech startups formation nationwide is Colorado. And Denver, Boulder, Fort Collins, Colorado Springs were ranked the top 10 nationwide for tech startup activity overall. So this is a hotbed of entrepreneurship and startup activity, pretty exciting. And Zayo, we feel like really we're pretty good at kind of threading the needle and being a part of that. And we talk about entrepreneurship a lot, which is actually a lot about a growth mindset. So you'll hear some of that today too. My preference for panels like this, and Brett is over here is my co-moderator today. Our preference is this feels a little bit more like a talk show and less like a panel. So I know David Housen already has his question ready to go. He's super excited. If you guys have questions, raise your hand and we'll probably be able to hear you, and then we'll repeat it to make sure anyone on the live stream can hear us. But definitely have questions as we go along, and you could direct them directly to one of the panelists or just kind of an overall, and then we can triage it for you. But definitely as interactive as possible would be great. And so with that, Ashok, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Ashok Reddy. I work with the Unreasonable group, which is headquartered up in Boulder. And we have the fundamental belief, and some have said the unreasonable belief, that entrepreneurship has the ability to solve some of the world's greatest challenges. And we've done that for the last 6 years by providing mentorship to companies from around the world. These are places including South Sudan, parts of rural India, or even Delaware, that are tackling challenges around energy or poverty or giving people a voice to reach their governments. So we have a series of companies that are focused around this area, and I specifically work with Unreasonable Capital, which is an investment fund we're raising right now that will deploy capital into some of these solutions and try to show that we can generate both a social impact as well as an attractive financial return for our investors.
Thank you. I'm Elizabeth Kraus, and I'm a local angel investor and the co-founder of MergeLane. So MergeLane discovers, accelerates, and invests in exceptional women and the companies they run. We recruit companies from all over the world and choose 10 select high-growth startups with at least one female in leadership. We make an investment in those companies, and we match them with mentors, resources, transformative coaches, and other investors to accelerate their business and to prove that investing in women isn't just the right thing to do, but the smart thing to do. And so today I'm going to be talking about from the perspective of someone who's been investing in women. And also prior to launching MergeLane, I founded an angel group called the Impact Angel Group that was focused on investing in high-growth startups that were going to make a social or environmental impact, as well as a financial return.
Hi, I'm Taylor McLemore. I'm the founder of Patriot Bootcamp, presented by TechStars. We're a nonprofit that helps military veterans and military spouses become successful technology entrepreneurs. We focus at the very earliest stage of helping these entrepreneurs. So we put on a 3-day boot camp that we move around the country. And it's 3 days, it's sort of a condensed accelerator experience, if you will. And it's trying to find those people in that military community that are interested and want to move forward so that we can give them a base level of education. The biggest focus of our program, though, is mentoring. We'll have anywhere from 50 to 100 participants in any program, and we'll pull in the equal amount of mentors from any of the communities that we're visiting. So we focus on education, mentoring, and then community. So we have a national network now of over 300 military entrepreneurs and military spouses that get to connect, and then we use that as a conduit to make sure that they have access to the best resources, whether that's getting into accelerators, access to capital from angels and VC, but we also support people that are going down the revenue and bootstrapping approach. So we have a pretty wide aperture, but really just try to be the front door and access point for that community to get into the tech world.
So I'm Brett Fund. I'm a managing partner at a company called SecureSet. We're a cybersecurity academy and accelerator. I'm also currently on leave from the University of Colorado. I was a professor there for the last 7 years, but have taken time off to do the new venture. But super excited to be here and to co-moderate with Rachel. So grateful for Zayo and their influence here, right? It's a very entrepreneurial company, and even host and put on series like this, I think, is fantastic. And so, as you can see from the mix of people that we have here today, it's just phenomenal. So,
Do you want to kick us off?
yeah, sure. So I want to follow up actually on some of the comments that Ashok made, right? And that is that entrepreneurship can solve many of the world's greatest problems, right? And so would love to have each one of you sort of react to that, right? I mean, so I think Ashok's answer is yes, I believe that wholeheartedly, right? But then tell me more about that and explain how you really think that's going to take place, and then also Elizabeth and Taylor, if you would weigh in on what your thoughts are on that as well.
Sure, I can kick off with probably the best example in our space that we would like to invest in, and there's many more that are similar, but energy access in rural markets. There might be, the numbers are staggering, something to the point of 3 billion of the world's 7 billion population do not have access to reliable electricity. So these are people who are not only off the grid, but who are relying on kerosene or wood or anything else they can find to burn. So this is a huge issue in terms of productivity at night, just because once it goes dark, like the families are not able to cook, they can't be earning wages, and maybe most importantly, children don't have the ability to read or learn or further their own educational capabilities. So there's a whole group of companies for the last probably 7 to 10 years that's been building infrastructure in those markets around solar. And so if you think about if you're somewhere in rural sub-Saharan Africa, there's no sign of electrical poles, there's no sign of any kind of life, but you can stick a series of solar panels in those markets, whether it be in a certain field and then that connects to 20 or 30 or 50 homes, or even individual panels on individual homes, and provide that family with light through typically an LED bulb, so that's going to generate a better light spectrum than they'd get from kerosene lamps anyway. And so the family then has enough light to be productive at night, for the children to be reading books. And that company that put that panel on that individual roof or built the microgrid for that community can act almost like the Excel energy for that individual market. And typically the rates that we're starting to see emerge are around $6 a month for the electricity, and that compares really favorably to the $8 a month they might have been paying for kerosene fuel. So there's 2 companies that we've provided mentorship to that are doing north of 10 million in revenue, a couple million in profits, and this is 100% in parts of rural India or rural Africa. So in a lot of ways, those companies are paving a pathway of we can be generating a really impressive social impact while doing it profitably and doing it in a way where you can take that profits and reinvest into expanding into new geographies or providing new products or services to that same customer base. But we're applying more traditional business practices to historically, let's talk about social problems. So, I like to tell our investors, we're not just, if you take the adage of teaching a person to fish versus giving them a fish, we're not just giving them light or even teaching them how the light bulb works. We're building entire economies and infrastructure around deploying solar across large populations. And then once we have that customer base in place, we can start selling them products around education for their kids or other things that they might be needing. So it's kind of going down that pathway of, instead of giving things to people, providing them the economic opportunities to lift themselves out of trouble.
So I've thought a lot about this question, and just to kind of tell you a little bit about my journey in answering this question. So about 7 years ago, I was in the position that I had some entrepreneurial success and had a little bit of cash on hand, and I thought, great, I am going to support entrepreneurs who are going to save our world, and I have money to do it. I feel so excited about that. But I can tell you it's really, really hard. And it's hard for a couple of reasons. So first of all, entrepreneurship is hard, really hard to be a successful entrepreneur. And then you add things like governments and emerging economies and the whole risk-reward spectrum. So for instance, some of the companies that I've invested in have potential to make huge returns, but they also have huge risk, like FDA risk for technologies that are going to support, life-altering medical advances. So you have all those challenges, but I think the biggest challenge, and the one thing that I hope that you take away today, is that the smartest entrepreneurs that I meet are not solving businesses, or not starting businesses to solve our world's greatest problems. So I think that entrepreneurship can solve the world's problems, and I think even in big companies, entrepreneurship can make a big difference. But I still haven't been in a position where I feel like there are enough really smart and savvy entrepreneurs that are doing things to save the world to feel like I'm excited about the potential of entrepreneurship doing that.
Sounds like a couple blog posts that I remember from you.
I think that those are two great perspectives, and I'll kind of flip it a little bit, because I think that the sort of the output of an entrepreneurial company or enterprise or organization is an obvious place to go with that. I think the other side of that equation is equally important. The power of entrepreneurship to help the people that are the entrepreneurs and give opportunity to people. And I think that's obviously one of the topics today, is sort of how inclusive are we as an ecosystem, as a community, and that sort of stuff. But I've seen it firsthand in our work with Patriot Bootcamp, where you take people that are military veterans that do face a very challenging transition when they leave the military, if they're serving. The other side of that is military spouses. Compared to the general national population, they have a higher level of education, and they're extremely underemployed. And one of the main reasons is they move from base to base on a regular multi-year pattern. So it's really hard to build a business, much less keep down a job. So you have lots of different challenges with that group. But the beauty is, when we approach the community, we don't say, do you have, and some of the stuff that's highlighted in the media, PTSD, or some of the challenges that a lot of soldiers have. We just say, do you want to be an entrepreneur? Because to me, what that means is, you say, do you want to go out and build something? Do you want to go after something with purpose, with the potential to create impact and drive change? So while the output of the companies hopefully is very positive, providing services, products, the value to the founders is great. And then the other reason that we really believe in supporting veterans, and I think plays into the question, is that we need to stay competitive, whether it's Denver, whether it's Colorado, whether it's the United States, and that comes through building companies that are growing in the right direction, just like Zayo has had a meteoric growth rate. We want to see the next Zayo be led by a veteran and hire a bunch of people in the community, and hopefully a lot of those will be veterans as well. So I think there's that side of the equation too.
Great.
Okay. So you did touch on a little bit around the idea of inclusion, and you're each touching a little bit of a different niche, but this one really, Elizabeth, this is for you. And that is that 3% of America's venture capital-backed startups are led by women. and only 1% by African Americans. So what have you seen are the benefits of business communities that are inclusive of the women-led companies and businesses?
Sure. So there's been a lot of data that's come out recently that shows that by at least having one female on your leadership team, it really increases the return potential of your company. So that's one obvious benefit. And then I think it's just having a varied perspective in business that's really important. So, you know, we found that a lot of women tend to be slightly risk averse, but they also tend to be able to see potential problems down the road. And so alone, that can be a challenge because you don't take the leap to be an entrepreneur. You don't take the leap to take a risk that could make you really innovative in your business. But it's also really helpful insight for, you know, potential roadblocks that you might face. And having that balanced perspective of also having a male who might be more willing to jump in with 2 feet before thinking everything through is really, really powerful. And the most interesting opportunities that we've seen really do have gender balanced teams.
That's great, thank you.
Yeah, so this is a question sort of for any or all of you, right? So each of you are working on certain demographics, right? And I imagine that there are certain challenges you're going to have to face in order to have the impact that you want. So it's sort of a two-part question, which is, what do you see as those biggest what those biggest challenges are? And then second, how do you measure your success, right? How do you really know you're having impact either internally or externally that you could promote to the outside so people can also agree that you're having your impact?
Sure, I'm happy to jump at that one. I think of success as people that are interested in becoming founders having the tools to do so. That they get plugged into the community the right way, and that they're able to pursue it in the means that they think is the right one, whether that's going for venture scale and getting VC money, or if they want to grow the business organically. Revenue is the cheapest form of capital. So we try to support all of those, but with that broad perspective, it comes down to, are they actually forming companies? Because that's step one. Step two is, are they driving employment? Are they growing the company? And I think that that has a very measurable impact on, you know, our nation, communities, et cetera. And then having sort of broad metrics. Like, we know that companies that go through our program on average within 2 years have either generated $200,000 of revenue or raised $200,000 or more of capital. And it's metrics like that and just helping them accelerate those numbers so that they can continue forth building great companies. That's what we focus on, and try to keep it pretty simple to those metrics.
So really quickly, what are your biggest challenges for the veterans?
We're fortunate in that we're really just trying to open up entrepreneurship. So being an entrepreneur is really not different for a veteran. You just got to make sure that you build the pathway from where they're going to the right educational material, to the right mentors, which I honestly don't believe is any different than any other entrepreneur. You just have to appreciate that context. So the challenge for us is finding them. You have lots of people that are transitioning out of the military, lots of military spouses, but mainly it's just access to information for those people.
Yeah, for our organization, I think the two big things that we're focused on to look at to track our success is the number of applications that come to our programs, and then the number of lives impacted by the companies we work with. And you know, for us, we're working with a lot of markets where there's just early nascent versions of I think how entrepreneurship might be defined in Denver or in Silicon Valley. If you go to Kenya, there's an amazing number of companies that are literally on one street, Gong Road, and it would be like walking up and down Wine Coop, and when I'm there, I can visit 15 companies that are, you know, healthy, growing, 5 to 6 figure revenue amounts, all focused in the same space. So because our communities are in some ways smaller and less developed than what you have in developed markets like the US or parts of Western Europe, we know the companies all chat with each other pretty regularly. And for them to come and be part of our mentorship program, there's no guarantee of cash. If anything, they pay money to us to run the program. So if we have more companies applying to be part of that and to spend money to join our tribe, we view that as a real strong positive. Then for the companies that are part of it, we're definitely tracking who's raising money, who's increasing their employees, how many lives are they impacting, and all those are going pretty well. And now our ability to increase our products and services to those companies, including what I'm doing of raising an investment fund, is another sign of we think, progress for the space.
So we look at similar metrics as the two of you. The one thing that I just kind of want to underscore on the job creation is we really look at meaningful job creation. So if you're creating jobs at minimum wage, that might not be as impactful as jobs that could really provide a meaningful life for people. Additionally, we look at how many women are in leadership in the companies that we support, not just now, but also going forward. So we're going to be tracking that. But for us, this is the first time that I've been in a situation where I can say our biggest challenge is actually fielding all of the interest that we have for what we're doing, which feels pretty great. So, you know, we just started this movement or this organization about 1.5 years ago, and we have had so much interest from investors and mentors and from companies that want to come into our program that we've had the biggest challenge in ramping up and being able to support that. But with that said, you know, one of the challenges that we have with recruiting women is when they don't match all of the criteria that you put out, they won't apply. And so we've had to do a lot of proactive outreach to tell them, you know, we want you to apply. We look at all factors, and we really think your business is interesting. And that's been really effective, but it's also pretty time-consuming as well.
Great, thank you.
Anyone have any questions?
Got to have something, right?
Yes.
Sure thing. So the question was, how do we find these veterans that are transitioning? And you referenced the TAP program, which is the Transition Assistance Program, which is one of many programs that the various branches run. The sort of final step to finishing your time serving in the armed forces is to do this program. So the answer to your question is that there is no one way. And in true marketing challenge form, there is no one effective channel. There's no 2 effective channels. There's no 5 effective channels. So we really have to take a pretty shotgun approach to working with what are called the VSOs, the Veteran Service Organizations, and those are some that you guys might have heard of: American Legion, VFW. There's some newer ones like IAVA, Student Veterans of America. So we try to actively partner with any and all of those to reach their membership base, because outside of the VA at the federal level, they have the greatest reach. And then we also try to take a local approach, where if we're, for example, our next event is in Detroit. So if any of you know veterans that are interested, or military spouses interested in entrepreneurship, our next event is in Detroit on the 23rd through 25th of October. We are going to the local VSOs, which probably, I don't even know the names of those off the top of my head, but it's the 1- and 2-person organizations in those communities. We do try to partner directly with the government some. We get some partnership through the VA, but not a ton, to be honest with you. And the challenge is, I think that the TAPS program is very focused on taking veterans and making them employees, which is good. And I think that its effectiveness in helping them become entrepreneurs is something that's still developing. There's a program out of Syracuse University called the Institute for Veteran Military Families with their EVB program and a bunch of other programs. And they've worked with tens of thousands of people. And they're starting to bridge that gap. Part of it for us is we're very narrow niche. We're helping veterans and military spouses interested in scalable technology companies. So it's also a very pinpoint definition of a part of the entrepreneurial spectrum.
David?
I'd like to hear your perspectives on the chicken and egg, which is what comes first, the entrepreneurship or the want and the need to kind of drive social change? And do you see they kind of, is it the first time successful entrepreneur, the second time they're at it, they'll tackle the social change because they've got that safety net behind them? Or are you seeing which one comes first?
So I'll take that one to start. So I'm going to take the second part of your question first, which is, do they do it the second time around? From our experience, that has not been the case. And in some instances, it's actually the opposite. So they try the social change, they get frustrated, and then they try something else, which is kind of disheartening to me. But I see an incredible percentage of millennials who are starting businesses around this idea of social change. So that's encouraging, also interesting. But then the challenge there is they don't have the experience to back it up as well. And then what was the first part of your question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, is it the drive to be an entrepreneur?
Right. A drive to be an entrepreneur. So the interesting thing that I've found, and I've now met with about 2,500 entrepreneurs in all sorts of different walks of life. And I find that most entrepreneurs are not starting their business because of money motivation. They're starting their business to solve a problem that they are obsessed with solving.
And you guys agree?
Yeah,
Definitely.
Absolutely.
And the ones that are just focused on the money usually fall out pretty quickly and don't pursue it long term.
Yeah.
And actually, one of the biggest challenges that we have is that people are starting problems that they themselves have, which means that a lot of other people are probably starting those same businesses. And especially with women, we see them starting a lot of businesses that might be a good solution for them and their small network, but maybe not for a global audience.
Definitely, and that's part of our logic for working with local entrepreneurs from around the world is that from our seat here in Colorado, we may have all the right intentions, we may have a lot of resources in terms of mentorship, but we aren't going to be able to understand the dynamics of each marketplace from this position. So we need those local people who are identifying opportunities in their marketplaces and then coming up with creative solutions for them. I think, like Elizabeth said, if they're just focused on, taking a company public or making a lot of money, that usually is not the right recipe. It doesn't ring true when they go speak to investors. It certainly won't ring true when they go speak to customers. But if it's something that the individual's been experiencing and they see an opportunity, then there are accelerator programs and boot camps and whatever their incubators and all the other terminology of folks like the three of us that are trying to provide resources to those people and improve the likelihood of their success.
Yeah, and I think it's a really interesting point about having domain expertise, but also the value of how do you have domain expertise but then apply it to different problems. And I see this a lot with the people that come through Patriot Bootcamp where they're passionate about helping other veterans. And that's very good. And I love the companies that come through our program focused on building a business around helping other veterans. But it's by definition a certain size market. There's a lot of competition within it. And so I really try to say, that's great. Make sure that is a business that you believe to be feasible and is the impact that you want. Because I also see on the other side that when a military veteran takes their experience running intelligence operations in Afghanistan to running operations in a startup, there's a little time for the transition and to figure out the translation of acronyms to acronyms. But having that perspective of running an organization as large as U.S. Army intelligence has such power when applied to building businesses. And it's sort of that cross-domain transfer of expertise that's really interesting to me.
I just want to follow David's question for you guys, providing money, access, and so forth. You want to make money, right? So what's the motivation more for you? Are you in it for the money, or do you also share a true daily passion?
If you want to make money, do not start an accelerator program.
So what's your motivation? Just to repeat the question for the stream.
So great question. I do this which is incredibly hard work, and it may pay off, but we're investing in very risky startups, so it may not. But I get up every day and do this because I think that there's nothing more rewarding than helping people that will stop at absolutely nothing to make their dreams happen. And I also just get to meet with absolutely fascinating people who have had amazing careers, who are really passionate about working with us and with me. So that's why I do this.
We're a nonprofit, so we don't have any profit motive. We do it specifically to help the veterans because we believe that that is a great way to serve those who have served. We get our funding from corporate sponsorship and from grants with foundations. And we have a staff that's paid employees, but for us, we have such a focus on education. And we're so early in the process, it would be inappropriate, in my opinion, for just 3 days to have any equity stake for the value we give. So that's kind of how we've done it. But the handoff point after what we do, the next people, whether it's accelerators, whatever, I think should very much have that profit motive. So we just do it for the love of supporting that community.
Yeah, so we are a for-profit entity, and I guess there's two ways that I do this, a little bit like what Elizabeth described. So what gets me up in the morning is working with entrepreneurs, no question. Prior to what I'm doing now, I spent 10 years in private equity building entrepreneurial businesses, so small to medium-sized businesses where you might have a CEO doing the proverbial wearing multiple hats and trying to move from one customer that might be 50% of their revenue and adding 3, 4, 6, 25 customers. And that process, that creativity that entrepreneurs bring to the table is very compelling for me. And I really enjoy hearing the stories like Elizabeth mentioned and doing anything I can to contribute to that effort. Fast forward the clock for us as an organization 5 to 7 years from now. If I've just heard a lot of stories and deployed capital, that's great, and I will have enjoyed that process. But personally, I'll consider that a failure because I need to prove that this is a profitable venture and entity so that not only is my organization sustainable and scalable, but really for, at least I can speak for my business partner, Daniel, who co-founded the Unreasonable group. We want to drive more capital into this space. And if together we can prove that this is economically viable to be investing money in these frontier markets, competitors will come in, just like they do for any other business in the US. And we want that. We want competitors to come in, because that means that you can generate an attractive financial return around the world. It doesn't just need to be in a US or a developed market venture capital company. It could be doing solar panels or education resources in Kenya. So I absolutely want our organization to be wildly profitable and to bring lots of competitors to the table.
I'm so glad that you made that point because I couldn't agree more with that. I mean, there's something that's so powerful about proving that it's possible to make a difference and make money at the same time. And the worst thing that could happen for us, and probably the worst thing that could happen for you too, is for us to have a really great program, but to have companies that aren't financially successful. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that's the other thing that gets me out of bed every morning, just proving that that's possible. That's right.
So I just want to really quickly build off both of these questions and your answers, which in some ways what I hear describing is that you can do both, right? So then that leads me to this question of, well, then is it just artificial that you have to trade off impact versus profit? Is it artificial? And if it's not, then what's the trade-off that you have to be willing to make, and when do you make it?
Yeah, it's hard. We have this conversation multiple times a week with potential investors. I think how we use the language of impact investing currently, and I think we use that language because it's not a proven market. Like, it isn't that there's 50 impact investment funds serving parts of India or Central America. There's a handful, and the investors who are in that space know that they're probably taking on a little bit of risk while we sort of develop this broader ecosystem. And so I think the impact terminology helps make people feel a little bit more comfortable with that. I think in 5 or 7 or 15 years, that terminology will go away. And entrepreneurship, as we, I think, benefit from it in the US and in developed markets, will have spread much more broadly globally. And you will just have normal venture capital investors in that space, and they'll just refer to it as investing.
Yeah, I've thought a lot about this question as well, and I agree with everything you said. I think that, it kind of depends on the impact that you're trying to make. So for us, in trying to narrow the gender gap, it's actually been a competitive advantage in many ways. But, in my other investing and trying to make a social or environmental impact beyond the gender gap, it depends. So I've invested in some technologies. To give you an example of the spectrum, I invested in one technology that has the ability to take metal out of water without the use of toxic chemicals, which has huge environmental implications, but also has huge profit potential because of all the different applications for that. On the other side of the spectrum, I invested in a company that was actually part of your Girl Effect accelerator called EYES out of Fort Collins. And what they do is they help prevent infection contracted during childbirth, which kills over 1 million women in India alone each year. And they do that by selling a kit for just a couple dollars that is a very simple solution to this problem. So it's very high impact, but the dollar potential of that is not nearly as high, no matter how you cut it. And so for me personally, I think that it is a perspective, and I think that it is a spectrum, and I try to think about how I can address this from a portfolio approach, both with impact and with return.
Taylor, anything?
I'd agree with those perspectives. I think that it's, you can take a very broad spectrum, and I like that use of the idea of it being on a spectrum. It's sort of like, you can, I think, paint almost any company in either direction. Like, where did they go on the spectrum? It's like, well, let's use one that's not typically in the impact space. Let's use Uber. Everyone knows what Uber is. Makes transportation easier, in my opinion. You might really like or dislike the way that they use 1099 employment, though. Positive, negative, it's a little bit of both. Did they set out to drive just impact? I doubt that was Travis's #1 goal. I think he was more interested in building a really amazing, scalable transportation company. So, you have, once again, goes the spectrum, and I think you could apply that analysis to just about any company.
So I'm curious. It's almost like the sort of the age-old leadership debate of whether sort of is entrepreneurship and entrepreneurialism, is it DNA or is it mindset? So is everyone born an entrepreneur, or are some people born entrepreneurs, some aren't, or is it a taught mindset, or / mindset that is because you have access to the mentors, to the capital, et cetera? Do you have any thoughts on that? Ashok, look like you're ready.
Yeah, sure. I think it can be learned, absolutely. Like, it's not, to be probably a really good basketball player, not that there aren't examples of people who are 5'5" or 5'10" or below, but you probably need a certain height range to make that work for men at least. I don't think entrepreneurship falls into that category. I think there's a lot that can be learned, and I think there's a risk tolerance and understanding that people need to have on, when they're raising money from investors or talking to certain customers or thinking about different hires and what's the rate that they want to try to grow their company. So I think that risk dynamic is one that certain people, in my experience in investing, they really get it differently and often more effectively than other people do. So that might be something based on their background or upbringing or a variety of other dynamics. But with that said, I think people can learn all the other tools that they need to if they have the risk tolerance within themselves and within their support community to do that.
So I actually disagree, but I think that there's a difference between being an entrepreneur and being entrepreneurial. So I think to be an entrepreneur, there is some sort of a genetic makeup that makes you an entrepreneur. I think, when you look at successful entrepreneurs, regardless of their socioeconomic background, when you look back at their childhood, they did things that were really entrepreneurial, typically. But I think that you can be much more entrepreneurial regardless of your genetic makeup, and I think that can really benefit you. It just might not mean that you are the CEO of a company, for instance. The other thing is, I think that what we've seen is there's a lot of people who are genetically bent to be an entrepreneur, but they don't actually take that leap for whatever reason. And by finding those people and matching them with resources, from my experience, I think that's the most powerful impact that organizations like ours and people that want to support entrepreneurs can have.
I'll touch on one point, which is access to resources is critical. Like there's no question. There are some people that are in circumstances, whether that's where you live, what your economic background is, your gender, your race, your background, whatever, that are honestly just, they have more access to the resources, and building these things takes resources. That's the nature of it. There's no question in my mind to that answer. I think it's a really interesting nature-nurture question about what that is. For me, Elizabeth said this earlier, but it's just really hard to build a company. It's hard to even describe that. And the best quote, I think, I've heard that attributed to Elon Musk and also Sean Parker, but being an entrepreneur is learning to chew glass and learn to like the taste of blood, which is very graphic, but I think gets the point across, which is it is painful more days than it's not. There are a lot of really, really hard low points where you're sure it's going to fail, but if you're lucky enough, there are just enough really good days and enough high points to pull you through.
So maybe we check in with the audience real quick unless you have something to add.
Yeah, I was just going to, my question, which doesn't need to be answered now, is I'm just really curious why you guys came today.
Yeah.
But we can go to another question if you'd rather.
Yeah.
Because you were expecting Dan. That's okay. I'm his stand-in today. Thank you. Thank you so much. Does anyone want to share why they came today? I know, Hillary, you have a question. We'll definitely get to that.
Or anything you'd hope to get out of today that could help you?
Maybe because there was lunch.
Mike?
Yeah, it's really fun and interesting, the little stories and where they come from and how they got to where they are, and just being part of that. Because to me, it's just like a learning experience.
So stories.
Stories, yeah. Absolutely.
That's great. David?
I would just comment, your difference, the distinction between entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial is something that we're really trying to kind of broaden the understanding of inside of Zayo.
That's right.
Zayo is a large organization growing. If we want entrepreneurs, they may leave the company, go do their own thing. How do we create the entrepreneurial spirit and be able to create those opportunities for entrepreneurial individuals inside of Zayo? So that's a lot of what we're trying to get the exposure to the folks, particularly who joined the company recently when we're already 2,000 people instead of 7 years ago when we were 50.
Could you all hear what David said? So I won't really capture this perfectly, but that was well stated.
Do an English accent.
Yeah, it's not pretty. I sound crazy. I try. David was talking, we talk at Zayo a lot about having the entrepreneurial spirit. After spending actually quite a bit of time with the Silicon Flatirons team, I've been talking more about more of a growth mindset. That's really that entrepreneurial mindset and what that means. And so what David said is it's really interesting what Elizabeth brought up, the difference between entrepreneurial and being an entrepreneur, and unpacking that a little bit and helping people that are new to Zayo maybe understand the difference a little bit, because that is really interesting. And what does that mean when you're inside a large organization of how do you sort of lean into those parts that are entrepreneurial, even if you maybe don't consider yourself an entrepreneur? Said close, yeah. Sans accent.
Well, and it might be helpful for me to share why I was excited to talk to you guys, which is because going back to the same topic, we find that, you know, entrepreneurs can really benefit from learning to be more scalable. So I personally believe that not everyone is wired to be an entrepreneur, and I'm glad that the world is like that, because the world wouldn't work otherwise. Yes. And so not every entrepreneur is wired to grow a scalable business either. And you know, one thing that I've really learned in my career, because I actually started my first job out of college in that office right up there for a company called Exclusive Resorts, which some of you may know, when they had about 6 employees. And from then on, I've always worked with startups. And what I figured out after a career of that is I never really learned how to do things correctly, because in a startup, you just kind of have to be scrappy and figure it out, and I'm really good at that. But there's also a lot of easier ways to do things, and it's really nice for entrepreneurs to have the ability to connect with people that have had the opportunity to have bigger resources to bear to solve problems. And then the thing that I think is so interesting about that two-way street is that the person providing mentorship, or maybe they're interested in investing startups, that is working with a bigger company, also in turn becomes a little bit more entrepreneurial because they're exposed to that entrepreneur. So for me, the best thing that could come out of today, from a community perspective, would be for us to have a better feel for how we could support you guys in becoming a great company in this community, or you're already a great company, but becoming a much better company in this community. And for you guys, if you have interest, to understand how you could plug in and get that sort of two-way street going.
Thank you. And actually, it's interesting enough, that was the original intent of the Thrive series, was the sort of that tangential knowledge that we can glean by just the stories and listening and learning and thinking, oh, that's really interesting, I could try that. Or I want to learn more about that person, I want to get involved with that group. And that's how we believe that as we scale, we're almost at 1,900 employees now and counting, right? That as we scale, we can keep that entrepreneurial spirit alive and the things that means, and harness that energy and that ability to say, I don't know, but I'll figure it out, regardless of size, by doing things like this and staying active in this community. To continue to get ideas that we haven't thought of, because we have systems and processes and all those things that are large.
And benefits, you don't get those as an entrepreneur.
Yep, the benefits, yeah, exactly. So actually that is literally the intent of this series, yeah. Hillary, you had a question, I don't want to lose it. Entrepreneurial solutions for diversity. Just going to capsule.
I think one of the exciting opportunities there is education. Education is being absolutely transformed right now. Learning how to become a developer was very different 10 years ago than today. There will always be those engineers and software engineers and developers that were self-taught. They are a great breed. There's a lot of other people that went through and did a 4-year computer science degree. But now you have programs out there, whether it's a full program taking you from not knowing how to really do much to being hireable, to groups out there that are taking you to being very specialized. And the time continuum of that is being collapsed, and the cost of that is being collapsed. Significantly below the 4 years of an education at a university, below that of most associate's degrees, and similar costs to probably even that of associate's degree or less at a community college. I think education is the first step to addressing that, because if the people don't have the skills and they don't have the sort of mindset to be an entrepreneur, then there won't be a way to include them, because entrepreneurial organizations are lean and mean, and they don't have a lot of room for people that aren't going to be able to directly contribute and contribute in a pretty independent fashion, especially early on. So the more that we invest in those programs, those opportunities, ensure that they have access points for a more diverse community, I think that's a great way to start the process.
Can I build on that really quickly, Taylor? Because I want to give you guys a chance to jump in there as well. Some people don't know, or some people question why PCB, why Dan, and others, and frankly others too at Zayo, are heavily involved sort of upstream with Women's Foundation, DSST, STEM Coalition, as well as the local universities, why we're involved with those groups, and that was the answer. Because in order to do something about diversity and then inclusion at the office, we have to work upstream. We can't just work in the four walls of our offices and actually do something about it, because it's very real. The numbers are not getting better. And so we absolutely believe in working with the education systems and trying to enact change at the policy level, as well as very much at the level of the kids that are entering college and that are already in, and encouraging them to go into great careers, right, with local companies, and hoping the talent stays in Colorado also, frankly.
And I think, things that you guys can do is thinking about who in your network might be a more diverse candidate to bring to Zayo. Yeah. So we just hosted an event in DC, and 40 entrepreneurs came, and 2 of them were white, which has never, ever happened in Colorado. And, I think the other issue besides broadening the network to people that you might know is this issue about affordable housing. So, I moved to Boulder as an entrepreneur in 2007, and it was a really, really big stretch for me to be able to afford to live there. And we sold the house that we bought there in 2007 for significantly more than we had paid, and we would not have been able to move into that house as a new resident. And so think about how you can get involved with your community to address that issue. And then going back to what Rachel was saying, it's really just about commitment. And the last thing that I'll share is we've really found that women have been most attracted to joining our organization because we believe that investing in women is a financial decision versus just something that we should do to make the world a better place. And because of that, really strong women have wanted to get on board.
I think those are both fantastic answers. I don't have anything really significant to add, except I'll just take maybe a step back. And there's been a lot of research on empathy and whether people just care about topics. And so there's a New York Times article, if you want to search New York Times empathy, it'll come up pretty recently about this. And the headline I took away was that empathy is a choice. And so I think it isn't just something you're born. Some people are naturally more likely to be empathetic. It's really a choice that we all make. And I think by the fact that so many of you are here, you're making that choice. If you are letting it known to Zayo and to members of your community that you want Denver to be a more diverse place and have gentrification and have equal opportunities for men and women, then it is a grassroots thing that actually builds really, really quickly. And feels like today it builds more quickly than ever before, maybe through social media and other dynamics. So I think just the fact that people are vocalizing their interest is going to be the root that grows and leads to more education, more people becoming involved in the space.
So we've already started to go down this path, but I'm just going to take us there, right? And that is, if you have to this audience, right, what's the call to action that each one of you would leave them with? Like, you've already talked about, Elizabeth, what you hope they get out of it and what they're thinking about, right? But if you had a specific call to action that you'd like them to think about or take home, what is that? Taylor, we'll start with you.
Sure. So I'll start with the Patriot Bootcamp perspective, which is think about how veterans can provide diversity, not only in just supporting those who have served, but the veteran population is more diverse on average than the technology companies that you can see. So by supporting veterans, you have a greater chance of also making sure that you're pulling in people from lots of different backgrounds across the socioeconomic scale. And also really think about initiatives around veteran spouses. Once again, amazing resources, especially for a company as global as yours. I don't know if you guys have flexibility in sort of working at distance or anything like that.
We do.
Then you guys should be hiring the military spouses, because there's not a more dedicated, loyal group of really smart people looking for work.
Let's talk more later.
Yeah, so that, and then just the point about when you do encounter veterans that are looking for opportunities, or supporting a veteran-led startup that might be, you guys could be their first big customer, something like that. Just know that they're going to work really hard. They are dynamic problem solvers, and they are some of the best people in the world at going after and solving a mission. So make sure you give credit to them up front for that. If they just went through the transition, though, and maybe you're their first interview, know that that is a difficult transition just in terms of the language. Because they're going to say, I was, this rank and that and this, and they're going to stop there. Because in their world, that explained everything about who they are. But that won't tell you guys that they commanded a battalion of 50 people that's, dealt with a bunch of strategic challenges, that also interacted with local populations and ensured that they were, trying to be the best representation of the United States possible. A lot of them are not very good at doing that. So make sure that you try to help them find that lens and help them meet in the middle on that translation question.
Great. So for me, I'm going to go in order of priority. So the first thing is, if you know any companies that have at least one woman in leadership that's a scalable business, we would love for them to apply to MergeLane. Our applications just opened on Tuesday, and they can do that at mergelane.com. Number two is, one of the biggest challenges that we have in supporting entrepreneurs that want to do interesting things to change the world is finding people to take a chance on them and to invest in them in the early stages. And so if you are interested in investing in startups, I'm really passionate about educating people on how to do that, and I'd be more than happy to have coffee with you. And there's a lot of other ways to plug in with anybody on this panel. I'm sure would be willing to help somebody in that area as well. And then the third thing is, if you have interest in mentoring startups, would love to know that as well. So there's tons of organizations where you can plug in. MergeLane is just one of them. And then lastly, on this issue that we just touched on, I think one of the biggest challenges that we have in promoting diversity is the unconscious bias. So we actually live in a very accepting culture here. But I had this experience the other day where I was meeting with the CEO of this large company that was pulling together a team of his friends to look at some investment deals. And he said, who do you think is the best of your class? And I said, well, I can't play favorites, but here they are. And he said, that entrepreneur is pretty fantastic, but she's also pretty cute. And the guys in the group would really like that. And this is what I do for a living, is promoting gender equality. And I didn't have the guts, because this guy was a really big deal. I mean, multi-billion-dollar company, big deal. And I just kind of laughed and said, yeah, she is pretty cute. And I have an understanding of how hard it is to address those unconscious biases. Although that one was pretty conscious, I guess. But at the same time, it's up to us to change those things, and we do have to just say something.
That's right.
Yeah, very, very well said. So I'd say in a similar vein, the mentorship side, we work with a lot of companies from around the world and a lot of places that most of my friends haven't been to. So if you're interested in partaking in entrepreneurs from those geographies globally that are really trying to solve problems typically around health, education, financial services, and energy, then let me know. And we have a lot of mentors that engage with companies at different levels, and it might be when the companies are here for our 6-week program in Boulder, they come in for a day or two and provide support, or some end up becoming coaches and talk to the companies once a month. So there's a lot of different ways to engage in that community. And then kind of along the lines of, I think, what Elizabeth described and what I was talking about with empathy, it's really, I think, a day-to-day thing of just how we all want to live our lives and how we all commit to living our lives. And even sometimes when some of my friends put something out there that pushes the line, like I've been really good about pushing back on them now, because it just, that dialogue, and I know it's hard in some of those situations. It can be very, very challenging. In some ways easier with your friends who you know well already, but it needs that grassroots movement. I think so many things in our world, if we want the change, we have to reach down, and it has to be an individually driven thing. And then if all the individuals in this room touch 3 people in their networks, and those people touch 2 people in their networks, it really starts to spread. And I've seen that as a board member for a lot of companies, where if we have a weird message that goes out to the consumers and there's a 1% change in sales and revenue that month, we dig into it. We know exactly why. And we tell our companies to start changing that message, because it's not going to be what's healthy for the organization and all of us as a community and culture. It won't scale up in that way either. So, but it does become incumbent on all of us to sometimes make some statements and to go against the grain a little bit.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for giving yourself kind of the gift of time. Time is at such a premium for everybody here. And just giving yourself a chance to kind of exercise some different thinking and explore some different ideas. I can't thank you enough for spending the last hour with us. Thank you very much for sharing your stories and your thoughts and your expertise, truly. Everyone at Zayo thanks you. Dan is at customer meetings today. I forgot to tell you that. He didn't just bail. He's in Texas. So thank you. And he sends his regards also to you guys as well. And also, lunch is in Kodiak. That's the word, everybody here, okay? Thank you for the Thrive series. We'll see you at the next one.